but it also reflects on kind of the 60s era where it was all about being free and your body is a beautiful flower, so show it off. It revolved around being hidden, like women history in general, and it's a lot of politics and a lot of hard topics to be talked about.
Why knowledge matters. Welcome. I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Mel McGrath, author and teacher. Welcome, Mel. Great to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's so nice to have you because you just published your very first book. Therefore, of course, we call you now an author, which is a big thing, publishing a book. So congratulations first and foremost to that, Mel.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
What made you write the book in the first place?
Actually, it's a very funny story. I took an English course because I'm an English history major, and one of my teachers specialized in fairy tales. It was called English Lit Fairy Tale 400 or whatever it was. It was in my last year. And so actually it was a university story written based off of taking a fairy tale that had already existed and turning it into a modern day story. And then I didn't actually look at it after. And one of my friends that I met this year, she turned around, I gave it to her just as a light read, and she's like, oh my goodness, this has to be published. So it actually started as a university assignment.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's Corinne, right? Who did this. It's wonderful.
So she became the editor of and the picture findings of the Freedom to Cinderella.
It's beautiful because that's really is the proof that there's so much things, that we actually do. And we think, wow, that's just like a university paper, but actually you can turn it into a book. So then the question is, what inspired you to ultimately turn it into a book? Because it's a big step from a university paper, because it's a very, very specific style, to ultimately publish it and to write it in a book format.
So actually, the university assignment, the professor was very out of the box. He wanted you to take an original text and then just change it into your take on it. So the way that I submitted the actual assignment was still in book form. So I doodled my own drawings of the book, and I actually had to show where I kept the original. So the original is based off of the Grimm's brothers Cinderella tale. So the Grimm's brothers are a very old folk tale that are quite dark and well, disturbing if you're not familiar with them. But I actually took it a different way. I didn't just sit there and write a normal paper and be boring. This class I really accelerated in because the professor was really looking for outside the box creativity. And so I did it as a story already. So when Corinne looked at it, she was reading it literally as a storybook already with pictures and words and everything. So for her, she just updated the pictures and added some more cleaner language. Not that the language was bad, it was just more I had to be specifically shown in the text on what text I added and what text I kept. So I had to keep it very structured in my assignment. So now moving forward, I didn't have to have a different color text for the original Grimm's brothers and then my own voice. So it was allowed us to give it a little bit more freedom and explain a little bit more stuff. So I actually handed it in as a book. So it wasn't, I guess, a greater leap to change it over.
Beautiful. And what made you interested in particular into this topic? Because it's a personal, very sensitive topic. The book's title is called Freeing Cinderella, and it has a really profound actually meaning. So talk a little bit about the meaning behind it and why you choose this particular topic.
So Cinderella actually is the most worldwide retold fairy tale, and during 2017 there was just a lot of political news that was forming. I'm not a big political talker, and I actually don't talk about it as too much in general, but in 2017, actually in 2016, there was just a lot of news going around, especially in our neighboring country, and that led into different things in 2017, which kind of just started becoming the conversation at every university table or classroom that I was sitting in on, and the topic just kind of became more in my life as I began to research more about it. I have some friends in the matter that had family members down in certain areas that were being affected by new political movements. And so the more I talked to them and the more that I just kind of talked to everybody in general, it just kind of became more of a push to bring it forward. And the assignment was to take a fairy tale and bring it into modern day light. So that was the main modern day topic of 2017, was around politics and choices that were being made, and some people didn't agree and how they were affecting different race and religion and cultures. So I just started using my creativity, and I've always had creativity flowing. I used to write all kinds of stories when I was little, none for class, but this was the first time that a professor was allowing me to be that creative and that open-minded. So I just kind of ran with it, and it definitely was very hard as I'm not in any of those cultures, but I find that at one point that's what really was driving me. It was the conversation at home. It was the conversation with even my closest friends. So it just kind of seemed more, I guess, driven by what was happening in the media, and then also friends that are living this personally. So that's why I think I went in that direction, as it is very heavy for sure. There's lots of dark twists in the story, but I think if people are afraid to talk about it, then those stories of survivors will never be told.
And this is why it is so important, because it's really basically overall it's about suppressed women.
Yeah, for sure. So the whole story is based around Muslim religion, and I'm not Muslim at all. I have a few couple friends that I used to know in university who were, but I am not close to the subject at all. But I think that at one point there was a lot of controversial around that during this particular time in 2017. And it was just becoming really frightening for them. I remember one of my friends sitting and saying that her dad may not be able to come back across borders because of this reason. So it was just becoming very afraid. And also some of the mosques in my hometown were getting vandalized. So it was just bringing a light that even if it's not specifically in those countries, it still happens in even my own town. So I was being really aware of it. So for me, it wasn't so much that I practice that religion. It was more of a voice for people to understand that it is still happening, and the culture of Muslim women in general is to have no voice. And I'm not speaking on any particular reason or story or any to offend anybody, but we just know that they don't tend to have a voice. And so the story was to share that light, and that everybody, and women especially, seen throughout history, have dominantly been suppressed forever. So regardless of your religion or race or mobility access, they've always just been put down. So to have women empowered stories are really uplifting and can help. Even if I'm not in that, I hope that people don't take that negatively, but I hope that they see that it's a female powering story on putting women together, and that the stronger they are, the weaker that other people tend to be. So yeah, it's a very big, empowering women's story.
And this is also so important that you are mentioning that, because it's really about the people who are still suffering, under that, right? That doesn't mean that specifically that's the case, but there are still women who are suppressed, and we should help them and give them a voice. And I think that what you really do with this children's book, Freeing Cinderella, I think in a beautiful way. What was the reaction of your friends, especially Muslim friends?
So obviously it is based off of Cinderella, but it's kind of more of an adult Cinderella. There are dark topics involved. And some of my Muslim friends didn't actually agree with some of it. There are some in political correct things talked about being naked at one point, and obviously that would never happen in the Muslim culture. So yes, it is based off of Muslim women, but it also reflects on kind of the 60s era where it was all about being free and your body is a beautiful flower, so show it off. It revolved around being hidden, like women history in general, and it's a lot of politics and a lot of hard topics to be talked about in general. If you are not Muslim, it could still be affected. So they said that it was really good and interesting to see it in kind of that story. And they got the references to some of the talking about different atmospheres about men's culture and how they are reflected to women. But yeah, the one part about where Cinderella chooses to express herself nakedly, they didn't agree with that. And at one point, I had the opportunity to publish it through my professor years ago. And that was one thing that really stopped me, because I didn't want to offend people. I didn't want to take it out either, because it is such a big part in the story. Even though it's only one page, it's still like the whole thing of it still is really powerful. And so they didn't agree with that one, and I kind of backed away from publishing it. And now, years later, I just lost connections with those Muslim friends, so I hadn't sent them the new draft to see how they like this version that actually got printed and published. But I still feel very strongly about it, and it's more the message of women coming together, especially in the years that have come from politics and what have been decided from women. So I think in that sense, they weren't totally excited about that, which I completely understand. As a faith that has strictly told you women should cover up and then completely go naked, it's a very big shift. So that part, definitely they weren't a fan of, but I think the rest of it, they were able to understand the message behind it, especially given the 2017 political talkings.
And I think what's really important is, like, books are here in order for you to make you think and to absorb new ideas, to see new perspective. And I think that's very important. And therefore, to some extent, if you're not at all controversial, then sometimes also it doesn't make us think at all, right? So books are here to make us think, make us develop, make us better humans ultimately. And I think that's a strategy, right, that any successful writer does to make it somehow appealing to people. And if it's just a story that, okay, well, I wake up in the morning and then I go to the store and come back, well, that's pretty hard to somehow sell this book. So it really makes sense. But also in this political climate that we live in now, a little bit less, I think, but it's almost everything is controversial. Almost became everything, even sports became political, which I'm completely against it, and in so many ways I think we really should come back to common sense and discuss things. If we don't agree, that's great. When I always talk with, for example, my atheist friends, I have the most fruitful discussion with the people that I really truly do not agree, but they make me ultimately a better human being, a better Christian, because I find even more interesting aspects in my faith, for example, that I have, if I would not have the chance to exchange and to have these arguments with my atheist friends. So I think that's so important, because
Absolutely.
Otherwise there's no point, right?
Well, I also think that you touch on a good point, that at one point it's a book to learn. And if your book is just about what you do, well, I'm sure somebody will buy that because they are struggling just to go to the store. But that's no longer a book in terms of my book in how I wanted to empower women. That's more of a self-help book on just being able to motivate yourself. And you know what? You got up, you got dressed, you went to the store, you did it. But for me, I really wanted to have a book that was really something that you think about, because at one point at the end of the day, people aren't going to like it. There are going to be people who like it, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I think for me personally, moving forward with writing it was just really to show that I may not have lived this, or it's not my personal story to share, but for those people who do have those personal stories and who are just not ready to share it, maybe that's what this book comes out, is that you're thinking more about how women or men in today's society can all be supportive. Even some women may not be supportive, so you just have to find the right group to give you that platform for those voices. So I think at one point I am the voice, or I would like to think that I am part of this big movement for women's voices to actually encourage women who are survivors or have their own stories that are absolutely gut-wrenching, but gets you to think that unfortunately this could be your neighbor, or this could be your best friend's grandmother. I think it gives women and men, or all generations, to reflect on different points in their life and really start making impacting choices for the future. And at one point, if you surround yourself with all the same thinkers, well, that's great, because you don't want to be completely on this different universe and have arguments at the dinner table. But I think at one point everybody brings a different experience or a different outlook on life, and your outlook could still be the same, and that's what you want to surround yourself with, as positive people, but you also want to be able to engage in different thinking. So you don't want to just be stagnant in your thinking. You want to be able to think and push those boundaries and open up on, well, why can't I do this? And why haven't I done this? And why is that this? And so it allows for also more research and more voices, and potentially leads to more stories and feeling comfortable to be heard on a wider platform.
That's so important, and I think life really is, the only constant in life is really change. And as Heraclitus once said, you never step twice in the same river. And that's so important, and you want to be stimulated all the time, because if you stop with the movement, with the flow, then it means basically regress and death. And there's nothing more appealing to have different voices all the time, and to really look for it as well, in order for you to engage, to become a better person. And therefore you mentioned a little bit about personal transformation. How does the book, you can also give us some example, help in personal transformation?
So I think part of the Cinderella tale is, we all know that the original Cinderella tale is she lives with her stepmother, her stepsisters, and they're very emotionally and physically abusive to her. And then she has this magical godmother come in, make her pretty and in a pretty dress, and be seen in some other alternative way by outwardly. And then she goes to the ball, and she gets saved by this prince, which is a man, right? So this story really grows in personal growth in terms of, it's actually the reverse. So she is still called Cinderella. She is named after the ashes, but she doesn't live with mother and stepsister is actually her biological dad and her grandpa and uncle. So we have the power struggles of men there. And then in the turn, we still have a ball, if you can say it a ball, but it's a 3-day event. And women of all abilities and race and backgrounds come and help her. So for me, it's the fact that women can stand on their own. And I know that there's all kinds of lovely men out there and who are supportive of their wives and their girlfriends and their sisters. But in terms of fighting a bigger power of hierarchy, the ball is still like represented in Cinderella as like her saving grace. And I decided to do the power of 3 because it is 3 major events that look inwardly on inner strength, outwardly appearance, and how you can still be seen as invisible but still be heard. So I've given the power of a voice to be seen in different ways through your eyes, which are just completely covered in the traditional Muslim hijab, and then becoming completely vulnerable and being completely naked in terms of this is who I am. I'm very free now in terms of struggle with identity, so you can only be seen on what you wear versus how you speak. So if you are a posher speaking person and you use bigger Oxford words, then people are going to associate with you with a higher educational learning. Where if you learn slang words out on the street, people are going to assume that you didn't have the best upbringing. And that's, words have big power in how you use them. So moving forward with this book, I wanted to show the power of 3. Your voice can be heard, and it doesn't matter what you dress like. It doesn't matter where you come from or your backgrounds, as long as you have the confidence to use your voice. Your eyes are also a big part of how you see. So you may not even be able to see if your vision is not there, or if you've lost your vision, you can still have the power of hearing and seeing. So I wanted to address on people to see. It's not to actually take in, to see through your own eyes. It's to understand different perspectives of people and see the world around you as it is in the state that you have, whether it is your other senses are heightened because of whatever has happened, or you can see through your eyes. It's not to actually see, because there is a quote saying that you may look but not see. And I think it's very important that everybody is seeing through different activities, and then to be completely vulnerable and give up all the clothes has also contribute to a characteristic of knowing your self-worth, that it doesn't matter if you come from the streets or if you are a queen. Your clothes also can be taken away from you at one point, and your voice is still really there. So if you are hiding behind your clothes and have a voice, well, that's still an impact. But if you feel that you now no longer have a voice because you have no clothes, well, then that is a step backwards. So like you said, we're always moving forward. We never step in the same stream twice. So I think personal growth definitely for sure is a lot of inner strength, but it's also about the community that you surround yourself and that builds you up into a positive way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that is so important, and especially if we consider like freeing yourself, right? Freeing yourself, and to be freeing yourself, for example, from the clothes is obviously more a metaphor, right? For recognizing like your strength within yourself, and that you can basically do anything you want. So it's not encouraging, this literally, but in a more, I would say, a spiritual way, in a truly empowering way. And I think that's what you also as a teacher, you're also doing, right? You try to empower your students, to believe in themselves, because if they don't have to believe to learn whatever it is, well, it's really hard to actually acquire the knowledge, that they need to acquire in life. How did you approach writing about such a sensitive topic? I personally think that you're extremely courageous, and I really salute you for that. And it's important that people are courageous in this world, because courage is really what makes us grow, what really makes this world so beautiful, because people had courage. For example, Elon Musk or whoever, who started building a rocket, reutilizing a rocket that we can reuse, for example, and all the risk and all the hardship that take. So I really admire that.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, it is big topics, and I've not experienced any of them actually personally. And I do know that some critics out there will find that very hard for me to have written on it. I have heard lots of stories, and I have lots of friends who have gone through different parts of, not everything, but different parts. And I think for me, being personally affected by those friends and how their life has ultimately shifted from some of these topics, it's very hard to move forward and wonder or talk about it. But I think putting yourself into other people's shoes gives them the courage to potentially talk about their own story when they are ready. I'm not knocking anybody's story. I'm not changing it. I didn't take any of my friends' personal stories and put it in. I'm just acknowledging what the world has gone through and what has been coming out in the news. And so a lot of it has been publicized information in the stories. It does talk about, not in detail, but there is mention of rape, abortion, abuse, neglect. And so at one point, those are huge topics, and that shouldn't just be on a one-line page or one sentence. It should be, those individual topics should be taken and given so many platforms. And I know at one point I only addressed it as a one-line sentence, but I have to also think that I do have to be respectful for those stories who have not been shared yet of those survivors, because at one point it's not my place to go into detail of them. So I have to be mindful of that, but it's also still a place where it can be shared. Because even if it hasn't happened to me, why do I have to now just pretend that it's not there? So for me, the reason that I wrote about it and wrote about such dark topics is because it is there. And I think people who have not experienced it still need to make it an open, free environment to talk about for those people who have experienced it to want to share more. Because if the world just continues to not say anything about it, it makes it so that it's really hard for those survivors to turn around and talk about it, or go to court and talk about it again. And it's because it's so silent that if people just don't bring it up at all, then it's well, it's whatever. So for me, I touched on it because I think that it's still important to know that it could happen to anybody, and I don't want it to, but I think that everybody needs a platform to feel safe and comfortable, and the topics are very hard, and given how they are used in the story, it does relate to a very dark story. So I wouldn't necessarily read it to your children for bedtime, but that's what the Grimm's brothers were. They were fairy tale bedtime stories. I just think at one point, if no one's going to be talking about it, then people who do have their own personal stories get further and further left behind. So I just hope that at one point my voice and my little story can show that other people who do gratefully read it, that, you know, there are people out there that may have never understood what you're going through, but will believe you. And that is the biggest thing right now, is that I think people who have never gone through it have a hard time believing it. And my story on writing it is that I do believe in those women or those men, because I know it's also highly not talked about that men can get into emotional and physical abuses or relationships and also have their own struggles as well, mentally and physically. Or so it's not just about women, although it dominantly relates to women and women's strength. I think we have to also look at the society we live in 2023, that it could be anybody reading this story that will take a positive light on it, but it definitely is showing that I talk about it. I believe that you have had a story to share, so that's why I talk about it. But it was still very challenging to write, to even put myself out there on this little platform, because I've not had any experience. And if questions got asked, like, how do you have the right to talk about it? And you're right, I don't. But in truth be told, I think that we need more people to start talking about all experiences so that people know that they are believed.
I think this is a flaw in thinking if people think you don't have the right, because how about myself? Let's suppose I never experienced justice. So therefore I cannot talk about justice, or vice versa. I have never experienced injustice, therefore I cannot talk about injustice. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't totally make any sense. So I don't agree at all that you what you say, that well you from certain perspective you might not have the right to talk about such a topic. But I think it is essential, because if good people stay ignorant or remain calm, that's where evil can strive.
Absolutely.
And that's so important.
And that's where I think, going back to, if I write about it, I know that it's there, and I'm willing to be ears to someone who wants to tell their story. So I definitely agree that by writing about it, by acknowledging it, you are giving platforms to these deeper subjects that do deserve being highlighted and believing. And I think that's where people are struggling. So for me, I had to get over my own insecurities of, what people are going to attack me from not having the right to talk about it. But, you know, those are so few people, and that may not even ever come. People may have such great positivity for what I've done. So I had to get over that fear, and that was my really only fear of, like, well, what are people going to think? And at the end of the day, those people have not experienced anything either. So I was like, well, I'm not writing for you. I'm writing for the people that don't feel like they have a voice yet, and that they don't feel like they're believed. So yeah, those were like my own thinkings. But then I got thinking back to why I originally wrote it, and it was because all the topics were so big, and it was a conversation of dinner parties and coffee meetups and everything, that it was just like, well, why are we only just talking about, like, oh, what ifs, or oh, that's terrible? I need to show people that I believe as well. So yeah, I definitely think that you're right in the terms of, if no one does anything, then it's just naiveness, and you move along and everybody else does not feel comfortable coming to you. So I really wanted to write it on base of people who are going through possible situations, and to know that they are believed and loved even too. I think that's a big thing as well. Like, are they going to believe me, but are they going to still love me at the end of the day if I come out with this news? And I think those things that have to come from within as well, is that, you know, they could be complete strangers to you, but they are willing to very much help you compared to someone that you've known forever. And I think Freeing Cinderella really talks about all these different women that come to see her and help her through things that now build a family at the end.
What do you hope readers will take away from this book, Freeing Cinderella?
I personally would like that everybody loves it, but I know being reality and realistic that some people may not enjoy it. But for my hopes of what comes out and the readers that do, I just hope that they see that women can empower women. You do have a voice when you use it, and that it just encourages more women to stand on each other's side than choosing to be on the other side and name calling them, or whatever you see in the media that women are doing. And this has been going on forever, that you have to be a certain size, you have to dress certainly, you have to have this kind of money or do this, or you're being a bad parent. And I think women need to stop shaming women in terms of everything. And you know what? Just support them. They may be a single mom who had a really hard day, or they may be going through things that you don't know entirely yourself either. So just being empathetic towards each other and not judging them until maybe you do have a reason to judge them. I don't know. There is no until you have a reason to judge them. I think personalities you don't need to make friends with every single person, and personalities sometimes don't allow that. And that is okay, but I think personally moving forward as a female too, that we shouldn't be knocking females down. Even if you're not in friends with them, you should still be encouraging them. And I see a lot of negativity on social media that, this person does this, well, I think you're a bad person, or because you do your nails, you're a bad person, or you wear this, you're a bad person. I think women need to start coming together, and that's what I hope for this book, is that they can see the power of women coming together, even if you know nothing about each other, or if you have never seen each other. I think words and actions together make a very powerful uprising. And I'm not even saying uprising in terms of anything, but self-worth and self-confidence is very, very prominent. So I think, and I'm very important. So I think just taking away from the book that, first of all, you don't need a man to save you. And there is no ball. We all have to be idyllic, that we're not going to have a godmother that comes and puts us in this very expensive dress with glass slippers, and we go off to the ball and we dance a magical night and then leave. We are individual selves, and men too. They're responsible for themselves. Yes, people can talk to God and religion and help that way and know that God will help. And yes, they do. And yes, he will help you choose those paths. I read a story yesterday that she chose not to go again, or she chose not to listen to the word, and kind of lost her way in the church for 8 years. So religion definitely, I know, still plays a part in individual personalities, but I think at the end of the day, women, regardless of your religion or your race or your capabilities, everybody has kind words. And that's just the hope that inner self-confidence and inner self-worth allows you as an individual to move forward. And maybe you are a mom and struggling to find who you are again, and everyone, regardless if you're a teacher, doctor, mom, aunt, uncle, you all need to be able to know who you are and say, I am this and I am comfortable, and I struggled today, or I had a fantastic day. And this book just also reminds people that regardless of what you're going through, there are good days, there are little joys every day, and you start believing in yourself, those joys will get bigger, and those joys will start taking over the whole day, and you just have to start putting yourself first. And that's very hard for everybody. I know that it's very hard for people who constantly are getting put down to put yourself first, but you just need someone to believe in you, the way that they do, and that eventually you will believe in yourself. So the story, yeah, really long explanation, but I think it's important to understand that everybody needs to self-worth them, or that their life is equally as important, and that you bring someone, even if it's just a hello to an older lady on the bus stop, maybe you brought joy to her life that day. So you have to start taking a step back in terms of how busy your life is, and just breathe and find even 5 minutes of your day that is reflecting on yourself, and make yourself more empowering and love yourself rather than making sure everybody else is comfortable. And in Freeing Cinderella, lots of women do end up helping her, but again, at the end of the story, it's about what she's done and how she's used her platform and how she's been able to change her destiny. And yes, you could call these women godmothers, and they do change her appearances and bring her different clothes and stuff, but it's also kind of like how she's wished for. So she's known all along how she wants to use different things, because the more she gets confident, the more she believes in herself, and the more good things come out of her life. So I think that's what I really hope for, is just women know they can be confident, and they deserve self-love and self-appreciation and self-gratitude.
It reminds me of what the founder of Sounds True said. Her first name is Tammy. I don't recall her last name, but she basically, why she founded Sounds True, it was just simply because she wanted simply, and that's her word, she wanted to simply be herself, right? She wanted to simply be her authentic self, right? And I think if you really embark on this journey, it doesn't mean that you become more individualistic. I think it's the contrary. The more you find yourself, the more you want to start sharing, the more you want to be loving, the more you want to give back. And I think that's when truly impact starts occurring and flourishing in so many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Definitely would be an interesting to read. I'll have to figure out her last name and read it, but it does sound very empowering, because at one point, that's the whole purpose of having platforms, is that you are sharing your confidence and your growth with other people that still haven't found theirs. And you gather more and more people, the more and more people feel believed and heard and want to share, and eventually reach out to more and more people that, who knows what may change, all because you one day just decided to share and be yourself and grow as well, personally and professionally, in whatever direction life takes you. And that confidence really comes from inner self-care as well, for sure.
What makes you feel alive?
Definitely being able to have the job that I'm in. I've always known that I wanted to be a teacher, and I've known since grade 3. So the struggle that I've had there has definitely made it worthwhile, that now I've got my graduate papers and I'm a full certified teacher. So that definitely professionally has made me feel very gratitude and alive. And personally, I just really I really like to shop, but personally, I really like having friends that have dinner and that we can engage in different conversations, or I'm not afraid to say something because someone's going to be offended. It's definitely different than coming out completely being rude. I think those are two different things. You can't be rude, but in my opinion, or I didn't know that, or please educate me in this. I think also just being able to learn and grow every day, and just seeing the beauty in things. There's obviously a lot of hurt in the world, and we live in a very isolating community that, well, does not allow me to go shopping. So I've had to now find another joy of just being able to really be in my own brain. And yes, COVID actually did play a big part in that, on being comfortable, being alone, and being in your own brain. But I think this journey up where I currently am now has allowed me to really be comfortable with my own space, because eventually down the road, family would be something that is in my books, and not everybody, but that is something that I would like. So just knowing that I may not have those peaceful times soon is actually very reflective, and it's very nice. And that's kind of, things can change, and your mobility could change, your driving could change. So every day I get in my car and I just sit there for like a second and say, I can drive. Like, those are corny excuses to enjoy life, but at one point it all could be taken away. And I don't want to think about the negative, and I'm not fearful and live in a bubble where I can't do anything because I'm so fearful of these what ifs. But I also just take them very, like, excitingly. Like, I actually like driving. I have my own car. I drive to work, and it enjoys me to know that I'm financially able to have a car. I financially can drive a car, or not financially, but I'm able to drive a car. I think those are what really are joys in life right at the moment, and just being able to share those with friends or enjoy friendships through food or laughter. And if we're having a bad day, then they know, like, hey, you can always come to me. I think those are also very important to realize, that they are people, and people who, like, do want to look out for you, even if you're having a bad day or a good day. Everybody wants to share, and I think that's part of the community that you bring yourself up into, whether it's in a large city or a town or wherever you happen to find yourself living right now. If you can surround yourself with positive people, even if you have a bad day, you know what? They've probably had a bad day as well too. So maybe not that day, but I think just being able to have conversations and not letting things build up as well also bring me joy. So definitely miss shopping and, like, socializing, but enjoying, like, living in my own brain, which sounds so weird, because what else do? You live in your brain. But if you have roommates who, like, bug you or something, it's still very good to try and have an outlet, whether that's art or drawing or however you want to do, so that it doesn't consume you, is also something that I find I've learned in the last couple years. Is a voice for sure in Freeing Cinderella, definitely a voice, but also being able to, like, be happy with yourself. They're hard concepts, but I'm very learning, and that's what brings me joy right now. Is, you know what, maybe my dishes are dirty and maybe I do need to go clean them, but right now I just need a chill moment right now. Or I cleaned the entire house, but you know what, I didn't vacuum, and those little things I just am pushing away because I've done so much. And I look at all the things that I've done that day. Maybe I did nothing. Maybe I watched movies all day. But you know what? I'm listening to my body more, and those are what finds joy in my life right at the moment.
Mel McGrath, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
Mel McGrath. It was great. Really
Thanks,
nice.
Yannick.
I loved it. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.e-ykm.com.